My name was Ahmad. I was a doctor in Jakarta, devoted to my faith and respected in my community. People looked to me for guidance, believing I embodied the essence of Muslim virtue. But deep within, I wrestled with a growing void, an emptiness that seeped into my prayers, haunting my quiet moments. As I treated patients, I pondered, was there something more, something unseen lurking just beyond the walls of my understanding? Then one fateful day, tragedy struck. An accident took me to the edge of existence, thrusting me into the abyss between life and death. There, in the darkest depths, I encountered a light so profound that it shattered the very foundation of my beliefs. Jesus spoke my name, and in his voice, I heard the deepest truths of the universe, the echoes of a spiritual war playing out behind the masks of daily life, weaving through the very fabric of our reality. What I saw was chilling. Religion, politics, even the values I had held dear were intricately interwoven with a hidden agenda, a battle not just for souls, but for the very essence of humanity. Fear and deception loomed large, yet amidst the chaos there was an invitation, a call to awaken, to break free from the chains of tradition that had kept me silent for too long. Upon my return, I faced not just the skepticism of my beloved community, but the daunting task of reconciling my newfound awakening with the life I once knew. I became a pariah, shunned by those I loved, but the urgency of the truth burned within me like a flame. I knew I had to search for the deeper meanings, to uncover the narrative that lay hidden beneath the surface of our beliefs. Now I stand here, compelled to share the journey that followed, a journey toward liberation from the oppressiveness of tradition and into the light of divine truth. I invite you to join me as I reveal the mysteries unveiled, and perhaps find the same peace that now guides my every step. Before we dive in, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Your stories matter. And if you love Jesus and seek the truths that transcend the shadows, subscribe to Truth from Beyond. This journey is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The hospital in Jakarta bustled with energy, a cacophony of voices and machines that filled the air. It was a place of healing, where I worked as a doctor, dedicated to serving my community under the veil of Islamic practice that dominated our society. Every day I treated patients with care, ensuring their physical wounds were tended to, but deep down, I felt an emptiness that I couldn't shake. There was a pervasive tension in the air, a mixture of reverence and fear, where questioning the status quo meant risking ostracism. In the middle of this spiritual climate, my faith felt like a fragile thread, barely holding together. One fateful afternoon, everything changed. I was treating a patient, her eyes reflecting desperation and hope, when, suddenly, in an almost surreal moment, I felt a presence surround me. It was profound, as if the entire world around me had faded away. In that stillness, I heard a voice, distinct yet gentle, and it called my name. "Dr. Ahmad," it said, reverberating through my very being. I was stunned, unable to comprehend what was happening. I looked around, half expecting to see a colleague playing a prank, but the room was empty, save for the patient in front of me. Then the realization hit me. It was Jesus. The encounter was overwhelming and illuminating. He revealed truths that passed through the barriers of belief I had constructed. In that sacred moment, layers of deception began to peel away, exposing the hidden agenda of the world around me. He spoke of a spiritual war being waged, not just in my life, but in the very fabric of our society. I saw visions of how the elite manipulated power, sowing seeds of division and fear, all under the guise of piety. The impact of this revelation was seismic. I understood that my work in medicine was intertwined with a far greater calling, a fight for truth against the very deceptions I had been plagued by. With each word from Jesus, my heart raced. He spoke of the suffering endured by so many, of how the spirit yearns for liberation, yet remains trapped in cycles of fear and conformity. I saw how the adherence to rigid traditions stifled true spiritual growth, how blind obedience left us vulnerable to manipulation. In that moment, the weight of my vocation shifted. It wasn't just about healing the body, but also about awakening the spirit. I felt invigorated with purpose, compelled to share what I had learned, to uplift those who felt burdened by their own unanswered questions. Yet, I was acutely aware of the risks that lay ahead. Doubts crept into my mind. How would my community react to my newfound faith in Jesus? Would I be cast out, deemed a traitor for embracing a truth that could dismantle the very beliefs that held us together? I was no stranger to the repercussions of standing against the tide, but this revelation filled me with an urgency I could not ignore. There were others like me, individuals quietly struggling under the weight of tradition, hesitating to speak out for fear of losing their identity. I felt a burden to reach them, to help elevate their minds and spirits, to share the message of awakening that Jesus had entrusted to me. Returning to my daily life felt surreal, as if I was caught between two worlds. Every interaction was laced with tension as I navigated the complexities of sharing this transformative experience, while fearing the potential fallout. I began to explore ways to connect with others quietly. But even in the shadows, the truth I had encountered simmered within me, urging me to act, to speak, and to ignite a spark of awareness in those around me. I knew that I couldn't sit idly by, while a spiritual war raged on both in my heart and in society at large. As I stood on the brink of this pivotal journey, I felt the call to embrace the mission ahead, understanding that every step I took could lead to both liberation and confrontation in the face of a deceptive world. I've spent most of my 35 years as Dr. Ahmad, a respected physician in my community, known for my dedication and skill. On the surface, I seemed to embody the virtues admired by those around me: compassionate, knowledgeable, reliable. Yet beneath it all, I grappled with an unsettling emptiness that haunted me during quiet moments. I'd return home after treating patients, their gratitude echoing in my mind, only to be met by the silence of my own thoughts. I often felt like an imposter, wearing the mask of success while my inner world began to crumble. What was the purpose of my existence? Why did I feel so profoundly unsatisfied despite my accomplishments? It was in those moments of solitude that I confronted the nagging realization that I was living a life dictated by external expectations. The values instilled in me from childhood, honor, duty, and tradition, had become a weight pressing down on my spirit. I served diligently in a hospital that brimmed with the aroma of antiseptic and the sounds of suffering, but felt painfully detached from the sacred connection between healer and patient. I was a man of science, yet I couldn't ignore the spiritual hunger gnawing at my soul. The simple truth was that I was lost, adrift in a sea of uncertainty, yearning for something more profound to anchor me. Then came the day that changed everything. I was treating a patient whose condition had taken a turn for the worse. While I focused on her vitals, my mind was elsewhere, swirling in an internal struggle. Suddenly, everything around me faded to black. I felt myself drifting into a void, ungripped by fear, but embraced by an overwhelming sense of peace. It was there, enveloped in darkness, that I encountered the light, a light so brilliant it felt like home. Just as the warmth washed over me, I heard his voice. "Ahmad," he called gently but firmly. It was Jesus, and in that moment, I realized the depth of my spiritual war. In an instant, revelations began to flood my mind. Jesus exposed the layers of deception perpetuated by those in power, the hidden agenda that kept people shackled to fear and ignorance. I saw the manipulation of faith, how leaders capitalized on our vulnerabilities, twisting the truth to maintain control. I could feel the weight of the world's suffering bearing down on me as I witnessed wars fought over ideology, families torn apart, and communities pitted against one another, each conflict a deliberate orchestration by the elite to sustain their reign. The realization was jarring. I had lived much of my life oblivious to the tactics that silenced questions and stifled awakening. This encounter awakened something within me that had long been dormant. A fire ignited in my spirit, compelling me to embrace my role as a catalyst for change. I understood then that my journey was intertwined with a greater calling to confront the spiritual systems that perpetuated our collective discontent. I was not just a doctor treating physical ailments. I was now called to heal hearts and minds trapped in the cyclical misery of deception. The urgency of this mission pulsed through my veins, urging me to return to the waking world with a renewed sense of purpose. As I transitioned back into consciousness, gasping for breath, I felt forever altered. The clutter of my old life lay behind me, and before me was a road teeming with possibilities. The truth revealed was my weapon against the oppression I had once accepted. Yet as I stepped forward, the reality of my situation loomed large. Could I muster the courage to share what I had learned? How would my family and community react to my newfound faith? Would they embrace me? Or would I become an outcast, a casualty of the very traditions that shaped my identity? Although, answers hovered just out of reach, but deep down, I knew that this was only the beginning of a journey fraught with challenges, yet filled with profound hope. During my prayers, I often found myself wrestling with an increasing void that echoed inside me, a hollow space that felt both disconcerting and unsettling. Despite my carefully constructed life as a doctor, respected in my community and devoted to my faith, I struggled with unvoiced doubts that gnawed at my spirit like a relentless pest. In those sacred moments of reflection, instead of feeling the connection I had always sought, I felt more disconnected than ever. I would sit cross-legged on the floor, reciting words that felt increasingly foreign, wondering if my prayers were simply bouncing off the walls around me, unheard and unanswered. The dreams began to haunt me even more vividly. Luminous figures would visit me in my sleep, brilliant beings radiating warmth and love that stood in stark contrast to the shadows of doubt, clouding my waking life. I could barely remember their faces, but the essence of their presence lingered long after I had awakened. They echoed messages of hope amidst a world rife with suffering, yet I remained conflicted and confused. Who were they? What were their intentions? As I grappled with these vivid nocturnal experiences, a growing sense of urgency emerged within me, urging me to seek answers beyond the rituals I had long adhered to. Then, one fateful night, I drifted into a trance-like state during my prayers, and everything changed. I felt a gravitational pull toward the same light I had seen in my dreams, a sensation so powerful that I yielded to it completely. Suddenly, I found myself encompassed by an overwhelming brilliance, and there he was, Jesus. His presence filled the void within me, illuminating every corner of my fear and confusion. I felt his love wash over me like a tide, erasing the burdens I had been carrying for so long. In that moment, a powerful revelation surged through me. Jesus revealed the truths hidden beneath the layers of deception that had framed my life until now. Through his voice, I understood the magnitude of the spiritual war that raged around us, a battle crafted by the elite who thrived on our ignorance and division. The illusions we had been fed, false promises and twisted interpretations of faith, became starkly apparent. I witnessed scenes of suffering across the world, a tapestry woven from chaos and manipulation where leaders wielded their power, keeping us anchored in fear. I saw how our communities were pitted against one another, how our struggles were exploited to maintain control over our hearts and minds. Each image was a call to action, a demand for me to awaken and to contribute to the blinding light of truth. Every revelation fused with the urgency of my own awakening, igniting a fire in my soul. I felt compelled to share these truths with those around me, to dismantle the chains of deception that held us captive in silence. But as the clarity settled in, so did the weight of my fears. I could feel the tremors of what lay ahead, knowing that confronting the hidden agenda could lead to rejection from my family and community. Would I have the courage to challenge the very beliefs that had defined my existence? Could I risk solitude for the sake of truth, for a calling that could lead others toward their own awakenings? The time for action dawned upon me, and as I stepped out of the trance, I knew that this journey was more than personal. It was about igniting an awakening in others still trapped in darkness, urging them to seek the light I had found. I faced a choice: to remain silent or to embrace my role as a messenger of truth. The spiritual war raged on, and I could either stand aside, allowing the currents of deception to drown out the voice of Jesus, or I could become a vessel for his message, carving a path through the shadows surrounding us all. As that thought settled deep within my heart, I felt an undeniable urgency to embark on this journey, driven by the hope of illuminating the way for others still lost in the darkness. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange hue over the bustling streets of Jakarta as I revved the engine of my motorcycle. I had just finished a long shift at the hospital, and the thrill of the ride called to me. The wind whipped against my face, a fleeting sense of freedom filling my heart, but it was short-lived. In an instant, everything changed. A car cut in front of me, and I had no time to react. The collision was catastrophic, shattering my world in the blink of an eye. As the darkness engulfed me, I felt consciousness slipping away, and I knew I was entering a realm beyond this one. Suddenly, I found myself suspended in an overwhelming void, consumed by an all-encompassing darkness. Stripped of my physical form, I experienced a profound sense of detachment from my life and my worries. But as I floated in that emptiness, a warm light began to surround me. I was drawn toward it, feeling a sense of peace that was both foreign and familiar. As I moved closer, his face became clear. Jesus, radiant and loving, appeared before me. In that moment, all the doubts, fears, and existential emptiness that had plagued me on earth began to dissolve. Jesus spoke to me, but it wasn't in words I could comprehend. It was a knowing, a deep understanding that pierced through my soul. He revealed the hidden truths of the spiritual war that lay beneath the surface of the world I had known. I saw visions of the struggles faced by humanity, families torn apart by misunderstanding, communities divided by manipulation, and societies shackled by the elite's hidden agendas. The weight of our collective suffering pressed down on me, and for the first time, I understood the depth of the deception that governed our lives. The manipulation was not just in the political arena. It seeped into our spiritual practices, twisting faith into a weapon that kept us compliant and fearful. In those moments with Jesus, I encountered not only the suffering of others, but also the vast potential of awakening that lay within us all. I understood that we were not simply victims of this hidden agenda. We possessed the power to rise above it. He spoke of the importance of seeking truth, of breaking free from the chains of ignorance that held us captive. Each revelation felt like a call to arms, urging me to awaken to the reality of our existence and the role I was meant to play in this spiritual war. It was no longer just about healing bodies. It was about healing souls, guiding people toward the light of truth that had been obscured by fear and conformity. As my time in this divine presence began to dwindle, the urgency of his message burned brightly within me. I could feel the gravitational pull of my life pulling me back, but the truths I had experienced were now a part of me, etched into my very being. I was on the precipice of transformation, and with every pulse of my heart, I felt the awakening grow stronger. But as I was drawn back to the physical realm, I recognized the monumental challenge ahead. Would I have the courage to confront the spiritual war that awaited me? Would I be able to articulate the awakening I had experienced to those still trapped in the realms of deception? As I opened my eyes in the hospital, breathless and shaken, I knew the journey was far from over. The world around me returned, yet I felt more awakened than ever. Each person I saw was a reflection of the battles we faced, the unspoken struggles, the silent fears. I felt a renewed calling to share my experience, to break the silence and bring light to the truth that had been revealed to me. The path ahead was drenched in uncertainty, yet I felt an unmistakable sense of purpose propelling me forward, urging me to act before the moment slipped away. I was ready to embrace my role in this spiritual war, ready to fight for the awakening of others who had yet to hear the call. After my miraculous recovery, the world as I knew it shifted dramatically. I was grateful to be alive, but the joy of my healing was overshadowed by the reality of my circumstances. As I stepped out of the hospital, I felt the weight of my family's expectations pressing heavily on my chest. I had been reborn in spirit, yet around me lurked the shadows of my past. The whispers started soon after, rumors that spread like wildfire. Through my community, branding me a heretic, an outsider. I could feel the disapproval seeping from every corner like a thick fog. I had encountered the truth, and though it felt liberating, it also felt isolating. Loneliness clung to me like a shroud. My family, once my support system, now seemed more like a distant memory. They couldn't understand the transformation I had undergone during my near-death experience. How could I explain to them the love I felt in that profound encounter with Jesus? The fear of being ostracized was debilitating. I would see the expressions on their faces, the disappointment mixed with anger, and I felt an ache in my heart. The once vibrant connection I'd had with my parents and siblings faded, replaced by a chasm of silence that seemed insurmountable. I grappled with guilt, wondering if I had betrayed them by choosing to embrace a faith that challenged the very beliefs they held dear. Yet amid the loneliness, an urgency began to rise within me. The revelation I experienced during my encounter propelled me to seek the truth, to uncover the hidden agenda behind the facades we were taught to accept. Each day I found myself drawn to the Bible, its pages rich with insights that resonated deep within my spirit. I would read late into the night, allowing the words to wash over me, nourishing my soul as I uncovered the teachings of Jesus. He unveiled the larger spiritual war in which we were all entangled, exposing the manipulation of the elite and the societal structures designed to keep us divided and distracted. I felt a growing responsibility to pass on this knowledge, to awaken those still trapped in spiritual deception. Conversations became my lifeline, and I sought those who shared my hunger for truth. I started attending underground gatherings fueled by the shared desire to challenge the status quo. In these discussions, I found brothers and sisters united in purpose, each with stories of their own awakenings. We spoke of breaking down walls built by fear, confronting the spiritual war that sought to keep us in darkness. I felt the spark of hope igniting within our community, an awakening that could potentially shift the very foundation of our lives. Yet, as I plunged deeper into this new life, I remained acutely aware of the dangers that lay ahead. I could lose everything I once held dear in the name of uncovering the truth. The thought of severing ties with my family tormented me. Would they ever see my journey as one of liberation rather than betrayal? Would they understand that my mission was to bring awareness to the very deceptions that had kept us all shackled? As I wrestled with these questions, the urgency to act intensified. The truth I had discovered couldn't remain hidden. It had to be shared. Each moment felt like a countdown, and I knew I had to prepare for what lay ahead as I stepped boldly into this new chapter of my life. In the shadow of my hospital, where the practice of Islam shaped daily life, I began an internal journey that was as secretive as it was transformative. I felt an insatiable need to seek the truth, beyond the confines of what I had been taught. My days were busy with patients, their faces reflecting hope and suffering. But each night, once the world fell silent, doubts plagued my mind. I found myself drawn to the Bible, not just as a text, but as a lifeline. The moment I opened its pages, I felt as if a door had been ripped off its hinges, releasing a flood of insights that flooded my weary spirit. Reading the Bible was a radical departure from my past, yet it felt strangely familiar. Each verse illuminated mysteries I hadn't even known existed. I lost track of time in my small, dimly lit apartment, paragraphs of wisdom unraveling my understanding of faith, of Jesus, and of a spiritual war that consumed the world around us. Those stories of awakening resonated deeply within me, igniting sparks of hope in a heart that had long been anchored in fear and conformity. Yet, the realization that I was traversing a path deemed forbidden added weight to my journey. A harsh reminder that, as I sought truth, I risked losing everything I had known. Despite the fear, I could not turn back now. I sought solace in a small support group of like-minded individuals who also grappled with the deception woven into their lives. We shared not just our struggles, but also our victories over doubts. Surrounded by these kindred spirits, I felt moments of pure joy and connection that had eluded me for far too long. Yet lurking beneath those moments was an ever-present fear, a gnawing anxiety about being cast out from my community, the people who had shaped my very identity. What if they found out? What would they think of me? The stakes felt impossibly high, and the weight of the hidden agenda kept pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. Within the group, I began to hear testimonies that echoed my own experiences. Stories of individuals who had encountered Jesus and found liberation from not just personal struggles, but also systemic oppression. Each testimony was a reminder that we were not just acting against personal demons. We were challenging forces that thrived on division and deception, crafted by those in power. Jesus often came alive in those narratives, urging each of us to awaken and recognize the spiritual war that raged on in silence. The revelation of his call sparked a fire within me, igniting a desire to spread the truth about the chains of manipulation that bound so many to a life devoid of genuine purpose. But while these reflections filled me with hope, they also threw open the door to overwhelming doubts. Each moment of clarity was countered by the fear of losing my family and my position in a community that thrived on conformity. I began to spiral into thoughts of whether I was strong enough to face the backlash of those I loved most. My heart raced with urgency as I pondered this conflict. Should I speak out about the awakening I had experienced, or should I remain silent, preserving the façade of my former life? The choice weighed heavily on me, stirring both trepidation and resolve within my soul. I understood that the path I was on required not just faith, but fierce courage to stand up against the very systems that had threatened to silence me. As I contemplated this, the decision loomed larger than ever, leading me closer to an awakening that had only just begun. In the aftermath of that life-altering experience, everything began to shift within me. My heart felt tethered to a divine calling, pulling me toward a purpose I could no longer ignore. I realized that this journey was not solely for my own spiritual awakening. It was a mission, a burning desire to share the revelations I had received during my encounter with Jesus. As I grappled with the gravity of this realization, the truth of the spiritual war taking place around me became glaringly evident. I could no longer sit idly by, satisfied with personal enlightenment, while others remained oblivious to the hidden agenda that manipulated their lives. With each passing day, I felt an urgency grow within me. I spent late nights reflecting on the messages Jesus had imparted to me, studying the teachings I had once been too afraid to confront. I absorbed the stories of brave souls who had stood for their beliefs despite the risks, inspiring me to do the same. I knew the path ahead would not be easy. Many would not understand my transformation, and the backlash from my community would be severe. Yet I felt compelled to break the silence, to bring light to the truths that had been obscured by the elite. The deception that tied my community to ignorance was insidious and deeply rooted. But I could no longer allow fear to dictate my choices. I envisioned myself standing before my family, confronting their fears with the very truths that had liberated my spirit. How could I share the love and grace I had felt in Jesus without shattering their beliefs? Doubts swirled within me as I considered the potential rifts in our family. But I understood that silence only perpetuated the divisions we faced. I longed for my loved ones to experience their own awakening, to see beyond the confines of tradition that had constricted our lives. This wasn't about abandoning our roots. It was about cultivating a deeper connection to the truth that transcended social constructs. As I began to share my journey with a small circle of trusted friends, I felt tentative, yet hopeful. Each meeting became a sanctuary where we could discuss our doubts and experiences without judgment. We explored the spiritual war together, piecing together the different ways manipulation seeped into our lives. In those conversations, I found solidarity and strength, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this fight. Yet the risk of going public weighed heavily on me. I considered what it would mean to my professional life, to my family, and to the community I had dedicated myself to serving. Would I be seen as a traitor for embracing a faith that questioned long-standing beliefs? But even as those worries loomed, the desire to live authentically eclipsed my fears. I began drafting plans on how to share my story broadly, thinking of ways to help others embroiled in their own spiritual wars. The urge to connect with those still caught in the web of deception intensified. I wanted them to know that they could break free. 2. Those dreams of luminous figures, whispers of truth in moments of solitude, began to coalesce into a clearer vision of purpose. My experience was not only a personal awakening, but it served as a harbinger of change for others, a chance for a collective awakening that could transform lives. As I prepared to take this leap of faith, I knew one thing for certain: the battle would be fierce, but I was ready to embrace it. The stakes were high, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Yet I couldn't deny the swelling sense of purpose coursing through my veins. The truth was a fire, and I could feel it igniting the courage within me to move forward. I understood that I would either be a voice crying out in the darkness or remain silent, bound by fear. The choice was clear, and I was determined to fight for the awakening, my own, and the awakening of many others still searching for the light in a world shrouded in deception. In the days following my transformative encounter with Jesus, I felt a compelling shift within me, a need to break free from the chains of my past life. The weight of tradition pressed down on me, suffocating my spirit and masking the truth I had uncovered. I began to see my existence not as a seamless blend of duties and expectations, but rather as a journey through a vast desert. It was a symbolic act of liberation to relinquish the identity shaped by years of compliance and fear. I needed to traverse both a physical and spiritual landscape, seeking not only my own liberation but the liberation of others who felt lost in their quest for meaning. Every step away from my old life felt like shedding layers of skin. I left behind the formal greetings of traditional relatives and the community that had long defined my existence. The streets of Jakarta were filled with memories that haunted me, yet each step became an affirmation of my decision to pursue an awakening that beckoned from a place deeper than I had ever known. I recalled the moment, suspended in darkness, when Jesus spoke my name and revealed the truths that lay beneath the surface of our everyday lives. I remembered the urgency of his message, the call to expose the hidden agenda that kept us all in bondage to fear and deception. As I began to share my testimony, I sought to reach out not only to those around me, but to anyone struggling with the same spiritual turmoil I had faced. In every conversation, I felt a mixture of trepidation and exhilaration. I longed to connect with individuals who felt trapped by their circumstances, silenced by the weight of societal expectations. I found solace in small gatherings where honest conversations could unfold. Here, we could explore our doubts and share our thoughts without the fear of judgment. It became clear that this journey of awakening wasn't merely personal. It was a collective struggle against the spiritual war waged by those who thrived on manipulation and division. My interactions grew, and as I connected with more people, I began to feel the tension of rejection looming over me. Each story I shared was met with mixed reactions. Some were curious, others fearful, and a few outright hostile. But as I looked into their eyes, I saw the flicker of recognition. I realized I wasn't alone in this quest for truth. The shared pain of feeling disconnected from one's faith and the realization of deception reverberated among us. Each meeting fueled my determination to speak out, to challenge the narratives that had kept us confined to a life devoid of spiritual truth. Yet amid all the urgency and hope, I knew I had placed myself at risk. I was aware of the implications of openly discussing my newfound beliefs, especially in a community where conformity was the norm. The elite, the gatekeepers of tradition and fear, wouldn't welcome my voice. They would view it as a challenge to the very foundations they had built their authority upon. But the burden of silence felt heavier than the fear of rejection. The stakes were high, and I couldn't afford to walk away from this truth that had been revealed to me. The path was treacherous, and the future remained uncertain. But as I stood on the brink of a new chapter, I felt the calling to embrace this mission. I was ready to step into the fire, driven by the hope that somehow my awakening could light the way for others yearning for their own truth. Now that you've journeyed with me through the depths of despair and the heights of awakening, I invite you to pause and reflect. Can you feel it? The palpable tension in the air. Something greater is at play. We are entangled in a cosmic drama that transcends our understanding, a spiritual war unfolding in the shadows of our daily lives. Each one of us is part of this greater narrative, a story that invites us to question, to seek, and ultimately to wake up. The truths that Jesus revealed to me in my darkest hour were not just for me. They are for you, for all of us. The urgency to awaken is real. The battles we face are not merely personal but collective. As I faced rejection and isolation for daring to embrace this truth, I realized that I am not alone. There are countless souls wrestling with similar struggles, yearning to break free from the chains of tradition and fear. These revelations demand that we look beyond the surface, to the unseen layers of manipulation and control, and reclaim our power as spiritual beings. So, I ask you, dear listener, have you ever sensed that stirring in your heart, a whisper urging you to seek beyond the familiar confines of your beliefs? Have you experienced a moment that ignited that same urgency within you? Your story matters, and I want to hear it. Share your experiences in the comments below as we create a community united in our pursuit of truth and understanding. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. And as we navigate this complex spiritual landscape together, I encourage you to subscribe to Truth from Beyond and activate the notification bell. Your support helps us amplify these important messages and reach those still trapped in the shadows. The revelations that await us in our next video could be the spark that ignites profound change in your spirit and in the world around us. This is only the beginning. Join me, Hamza, as we continue to uncover the mysteries that have been hidden for so long. Together, we will light the way through darkness and into the truth that awaits. Thank you for being here, for being part of this awakening. Remember, you are called to shine.